The House will come to order. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 2125. The clerk will report the bill.
House File number 2125, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to financing and the operation of state and local government, the second engrossment.
I recognize the member from Clay, the author of the bill, Representative Marquart, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. And before we start, I want to say what an honor it has been to be able to work with 19 other excellent, dedicated, hard-working committee members on the Tax Committee. And every single one of those members, Democrats and Republicans, they want the best for their district and they want the best for the state. And we had some great conversations, but it moved the state forward. So a huge thank you to committee members. Lead Representative Davids, thank you so much for your cooperation, your assistance through this session. I really, really appreciated that. Thank you. And of course, to the folks that make us really look good, the excellent staff we have, nonpartisan and partisan staff who are in the back in the alcoves, never too far away from the chair, that do just an excellent job making sure they're working hard for the state and things are moving forward. So, members, when we started out this year in the Tax Committee, we really had a number of goals that we wanted to accomplish. And one was to make sure we could make a difference in people's lives, that we could create a tax code, create a tax bill that helped everyone everywhere, and that would improve their quality of life and also move this economy forward. We also talked about creating a system, a tax code that was more fair and leveled the playing field for our working families and our senior citizens and our farmers and our small businesses. Next, we wanted to do some real reform. We really wanted to create a tax system that conformed to the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, but also made taxes simpler, if you can believe that, to try to make the tax system simpler for taxpayers around the state. And finally, to create a tax bill that was more accountable and more transparent. A tax bill where people would be able to tell where their dollars go and where and what type of value they're getting for those dollars. So let me talk about those 4 goals in more detail and what we do here in House File 2125, the tax bill. The tax bill is really about building a great future for Minnesota. It's about providing the resources that set the foundation that really provides those investments that are going to improve people's lives around this state. And it's also going to make sure that our economy continues to move forward. And members, we have future budget deficits. We have future budget deficits. Into the next biennium, we have a budget deficit. And so what that means is that you cannot spend $1 in this biennium of ongoing funding, whether that's for education or for health care or for public safety or whatever that might be, without raising some resources into the next biennium. It cannot be done. And so we could stay with the status quo, but we know there is no such thing really as the status quo. You're either moving backwards or you're moving forward. This tax bill allows the state to continue the excellent and good momentum that it has going in improving the quality of life for folks around this state. And one of the things that this tax bill allows for investment is in education. Members, a few days ago, you heard about the historic investment in this budget for education. the historic investments that will actually move the needle for our students. And you saw a headline 2 days ago where it talked about we hit an all-time record in the 161-year history of this great state. 83% of our students graduated. That's an all-time high. And all groups, including minority groups, increased. That is some really good momentum. Do we have work to do? Yes. But why would we take our foot off the pedal at this point? When we have things moving, things that have occurred in the last 5 or 6 years are starting to take hold in education and getting to that world's best workforce and closing the achievement gap that will be crucial for our future economy. And give you an idea of how significant that was, is that a few nights ago there was a member who asked a few of our suburban members about funding on education. So let me give you a perspective of what you can do when you have a tax bill that puts Minnesotans first. So Representative Hewitt, you were mentioned and asked by a member the other night about funding for your suburban district in Rosemount, District 196. In the bill that Chair Dabney presented, the DFL presented the other night, in these 2 years, the per pupil funding increase is $769. $769. Back in 2015, the bill that left the House had an increase of $137 for Rosemount. And in 2017, that bill, the education bill that left the House floor, had $247. So go home and tell your folks, Representative Hewitt, because we have put a priority to move this state forward, that the investment in those students in Rosemount is going to be 5.5 times greater than came off the floor 4 years ago and 3 times greater than 2 years ago. That's something I'd be proud to take home, and we're making that happen with this tax bill. Representative Tapke, you were mentioned also. And his district of Shakopee will receive in the next 2 years in education $865 per pupil of new funding. 4 years ago, $145 came off the House floor. That was an increase in this year 6 times the per pupil funding than what we saw come off the floor in 2015. And when I look at the suburban, and I'm mentioning suburban right now because that's what was brought up the other night specifically. The total that goes out to the suburbs in the DFL budget education bill is $866 per pupil in the suburbs. What was it 4 years ago? $158. 5.5 times more funding per pupil in this budget than 4 years ago. And I could go everywhere in the state, and it would be the same amount. This is historic, and it's making a difference, and it's going to prevent cuts of teachers and staff in these school districts. And that's huge. And I want to mention that because if we were not to be bold and we were just say the status quo is okay, we wouldn't be able to provide this historic investment. So that is crucial. You look at higher education funding. Since 1970 in the University of Minnesota, tuition and fees have gone up 5 times higher than inflation. In the 4-year colleges in Minnesota, tuition and fees have gone up 4 times faster than inflation since 1970. And you'll wonder why we rank 5th in student debt in the nation. In the higher ed bill you're going to hear next week, it freezes tuition at all of the 2- and 4-year colleges for 2 years. Says enough of that. Enough of that, we're going to freeze. You would not be able to do that if you were not having a bold budget and a bold tax bill that was going to be able to provide that important funding. So the investment's important. We've got a workforce shortage right now. It's a tight workforce. So that means we've got to increase productivity, which we do through all the investments in education, but you also have to attract and retain families into this state. And this tax bill does that, as you hear the focus we put on working families. So let's talk about the provisions in the tax bill. So one of the things we came here to do was to do tax conformity. This does conform to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. That does that. We start with federal adjusted gross income, so now we separate, and we're no longer linked to the federal government. And I always think the less you can be linked to the federal government might be for the better. And that's what we do here. We also, for a lot of people who, because we didn't get this done last year for tax year 2018, we have a system where the Department of Revenue can go back. So when people in 2019 file, they can go back to 2018, and the Department of Revenue will adjust those returns. So we provide people, especially if you're depreciating equipment or whatever, it's really important to get on the same page of the federal government. This bill will allow taxpayers to do that. But let me talk about the real tax reform in this bill. Probably the centerpiece is that we raise the standard deduction to the federal level. We wrap the personal exemption into the standard deduction, which increases that to the federal level of $24,400. So what does that mean? It means that the two will match up, which will make it a lot simpler for taxpayers when they move from their federal to their state returns. It also means now that 93% of all Minnesotans will just be able to take the standard deduction. They're not going to have to keep track of every little thing they do, all the paperwork. If it's $24,400 or less, which will be 93% of the filers, it makes it that much simpler. The IRS estimates the average non-business tax filer spends 7 hours and spends $110 on their taxes. That will reduce this immensely. But the tax cut benefits are these, that with this, over 2 million Minnesotans will see a tax cut. And on the median household income of about $68,000, $69,000, be about a 7% cut, a 7% income tax cut. And there's something else that's kind of interesting, is that a family of 4 now, because one thing that is different from the federal bill on this portion is we keep the dependent exemptions. So you still have a family size adjustment. And so if a family of 4, you're now going to have a zero tax bracket of about $32,900. That means on the first $32,900 of income, no taxes. And of the states that have an income tax, we now will have the 3rd highest zero tax rate. And so for a median household income, that's about half of their income. Means they'll work the first half of the year, basically no taxes. That's what this tax bill will do. We also invest in working families, the working family credit. It's about $82 million there. One of the most important programs we can put dollars into. It goes to about 388,000 Minnesotans will see a cut in their taxes because of this. And one of the major things that we do to help our working families is we increase, for the first time in Minnesota, an extra benefit for when you hit 3 children or more. But this is one program that we know makes a difference in people's lives. The Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis took a look at this and said it increases employment for working single mothers. It reduces child poverty. It reduces welfare rolls. And it creates a better transition for people moving from welfare to work and keep them working. It's one of those programs that have great benefits. For senior citizens, $23 million increase in increasing the exclusion and cutting taxes on Social Security benefits. If this bill becomes law, 56% of all senior citizens will no longer pay any taxes on their Social Security benefits. So what I just totaled there was $330 million of income tax cuts for our working families and seniors in this biennium. Let me say that again. $330 million of cuts for our working families and our seniors. We've decided they are the priority. It's time we level the playing field for our working family and our senior citizens, and this bill does just that. Our farmers, you've heard about this. You heard Representative Poppy talk about the dairy industry yesterday. It's a crisis right now in agriculture. And our ag economy relates to at least about 20% of the jobs in this state. I don't know of any industry that can match that. Agriculture is the backbone of our state. It's the backbone of our economy. And the University of Minnesota just came out and said that income went down for the 6th year in a row for our farmers to the lowest income level since the 1980s. 1,100 dairy farms have gone out of operation in the last 6 years, almost 200 a year. And I don't know if anyone had a chance to see on the YouTube video by a 26-year-old dairy farmer from Pine Island. And he had just had it's heart-wrenching. He had just had a kind of a disagreement with his father. They had to buy feed and they couldn't afford it, so they were talking about how many cows they had to sell. It's about a 200-cow farm. And he said, a quote his dad said is, "Here I've been working all these years, and I have less now than I did back when I started." We as a state cannot control prices. We can't control the weather. We can't really control trade agreements. But we can control their costs. And what we do in this bill is provide $30 million of property tax relief by increasing the agricultural school bond credit from 40% to 70%. That is significant. It will also help create more equity for rural schools and rural students. And you heard yesterday that because of the funding, there's also an additional $10 million to help dairy farms, another $7 million in the ag bill. $47 million directed just to farmers. Also in this bill is something called Section 179 full expensing. And that basically means that if a farmer or a small business purchases a piece of equipment, they can deduct up to $1 million in the first year. This is significant. Basically, if you buy a $200,000 tractor, that deduction the first year pretty much will take up the down payment, pay for the down payment. It's very significant. We also have $20 million for the angel investment credit. If you total that up, in just this biennium, it's $272 million of tax cuts for farmers and small businesses. $272 million. And I'm not going to talk about the property tax cuts because our excellent Chair Loeffler will do that. But counting the $25 million from the education bill, there is $100 million of direct property tax cuts for our families, our seniors, farmers, $100 million of direct property tax cuts. Members, we have put a priority on our working families and our seniors and our farmers and small businesses, and we've stepped up to the plate and said we're going to provide some real targeted tax cuts for you. A couple other areas in the tax bill. There is the Minnesota Taxpayers Receipt. So you're going to be able to go online and find out where your hard-earned tax dollars go, and also what type of value you're getting for those tax dollars. Every citizen should know when they're paying their taxes that they are getting stronger, safer, better educated, healthier communities. They should know that when they pay their tax dollars. And finally, I want to say, as we look at this, is that this is an honest, fiscally responsible budget and tax bill. What is in this year's budget is what you see is what you get. There are no phase-ins, there's no shifts. It is an honest, upfront, fiscally responsible budget. We don't shift things into the future. Everything that's in this biennium is in the next one. And there's no new ones into the next one. And I think that's very important. So I just talked about $600–700 million of tax cuts. Tax cuts. So how do we get there? How do we get there? We get there by creating a system that is fair. We bring fairness into the system to level the playing field. And there's really three main areas in which we raise revenue. But before I do that, I want to mention that 96% of all the revenue that is going to fund the House DFL budget plan, 96%, I think this is important, 96% of all of the revenue that is going to fund the DFL budget has already been approved bipartisanly by this body and by the governor and most of you. The total revenue increases in the total budget is 4%. And the tax bill contributes 2.9 of it. So the tax bill isn't even a full 4% of it. There's other 4%. 96% has already been signed off, agreed to, approved. So let me talk about the other 2.9% that we're going to probably debate today. There's three main areas. About 25% of it comes from the tax conformity measures that we all agreed on last year. That's about 25%. Another 25% comes from a preference rate tax, which is any capital gain over $500,000, excluding farmland, that's excluded, you'll pay a 3% tax on that, over $500,000. So let me talk about the other 50%, really the biggest part. One of the ways in which we're going to create fairness in this tax bill is by bringing back dollars to Minnesota that big multinational corporations have shifted through gimmicks, through tax avoidance, into what are called tax havens, low tax nations. We are going to bring those back to Minnesota. Because when we let those companies artificially shift taxes to overseas, when that should rightfully be income here, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit here in a second, other businesses who don't have overseas operations are put at a disadvantage. They pay more in taxes. They pay more. In fact, there was a small business survey that was done. 7 out of 10 businesses said they thought it was very unfair that these big corporations were getting these shifting taxes to tax haven. They thought that was unfair and hurt their businesses, and it does. It's also not fair to our senior citizens, our working families, or our farmers who pay more because income that should be here in Minnesota is shifted to a tax haven, over to the Cayman Islands or Bermuda or Bahamas or the Virgin Islands, Luxembourg. We've got to bring those dollars back. It also makes it a lot tougher for education to be funded, or higher education, or these things that we really need. It puts us at a disadvantage. And I don't think it's fair that a senior citizen should pay more because we're allowing tax gimmicks and shifts of a multinational corporation to put their taxes in Bermuda. I don't think it's fair to farmers. I don't think it's fair to small businesses. We've got to, now, is it legal? Yes, it's legal. Is it right? Is it fair? No, it's not. And let me say this. We have great, excellent corporate partners in Minnesota here. And by the way, most of the revenue raised by this is not from Minnesota corporations. Most of the time, I mean, these are worldwide corporations. So, how big is the problem? The Congressional Budget Office says even after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that nationally $235 billion of income is artificially shifted over into another country. $235 billion. And the estimates are that if Minnesota was kind of to tax all that, it would bring in about $418 million a year. We don't do that. So how does it work? How does it work? How do they shift those taxes? So the way it would work is you've got a business here that may be a domestic, we'll call it Corporation A, and they transfer their intellectual or intangible property over to Bermuda, which is a low or no tax country. So they'll shift intangible property like patents and trademarks and copyrights and drug formulas, and then they will purchase back and use that from that basically shell subsidiary that they have. So even though they've been selling products here in the U.S. and earning, let's say, $100 of income, they're able to shift basically $50 off here by purchasing or using back these patents and intangible property. And so they can lower now their income here domestically down to $50. And yet their activity really should be the $100. And they should be paying that because they still benefit from our education, from the markets, from our infrastructure. It's taxes they should be paying. Another way they do that is shift all of their debt from the low tax area to the high tax area. So they might shift all their debt over to the corporation, so then the interest that is on that debt can be deducted. Artificial ways. This problem is so bad that even the federal government, President Trump and the Republican Congress said, we've got a problem here. And so they set something up called Global Intangible Low Tax Income, otherwise known as GILTI. And they said, we're going to have something that's going to try to capture those back. They gave us a tool. Finally, after 35 years, after the federal government said they're going to try to stop this tax avoidance, they have finally given us a tool here in Minnesota. Why wouldn't we use it to fairly bring back those dollars? And that's what we're doing in this plan. And so what do? What we do, it's a combination between GILTI and tax havens. And so we basically say that if you are triggered under GILTI, under the federal law, which a lot of times will be a controlled foreign corporation, we then bring that back to the unitary domestic company and then apportion it according to how many sales they have in Minnesota. Bring it back to the apportionment. No other state does it quite this way. But then we say to that company, after we bring that back from that corporation, we then say, but if you want to go with a different, rather than just taking that one corporation, you could take all of your subsidiaries around the nation and then around the world and then count that, and we get the sales factors and their income. That's called the Worldwide Combined Reporting System. So we give them an option in the state. And I will tell you, the Worldwide Combined Reporting System, which was used by California in the early 80s, was backed up by 2 Supreme Court cases. So 26 states tax guilty right now. We probably have the most sound constitutionally basis to do that. So it's the right thing to do. It's the fair thing to do. And so we may talk about that more. So members, I'm going to turn this over to Representative Loeffler. But this is a bill that invests in our people. It provides tax cuts to those people who have been left behind in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It benefits and prioritizes our working families and our senior citizens and our farmers and our small businesses. And it creates a fair system for everyone. We're going to put small businesses on the same level field as big corporations, which they deserve to do. We're going to help farmers who are in a crisis right now and really direct relief towards the backbone of our economy. That's what we're going to do. And the bottom line is, this is going to make sure it's going to keep the momentum that we have to continue to make this a great state, and we can make it a better state with this tax bill. And so, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, if I could turn this over.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Property taxes have been increasing dramatically and significantly across the state in the last few years. And this bill takes a variety of steps to address that. And it does so through direct property tax relief to homeowners and renters, increasing housing affordability in a way that goes directly to the taxpayer. And this is an area that hasn't been adjusted since 2013. But since that time, residential homestead taxes have gone up over 20%. Rental property taxes have gone up even more. And it's making it difficult for many people to obtain or even maintain their home ownership. And so we address this with $100 million by increasing the eligibility and the amount of the refunds for homeowners. We also do the same for the renters, although at a dramatically less amount of income and amounts. The homeowner increase will average $204. The renters increase will average $60, and both programs are designed progressively so that, and about a third of the benefits will go to people who are either retired seniors or people with disabilities. These are proven programs that have benefited people throughout the state, and with the changes that we've put in, over 1 million people in Minnesota will benefit from these refunds. In this bill, that $100 million. As Chair Marquart did, we stepped up to help our ag economy that is struggling by increasing the agricultural property credit on school bond referendums from 40% to 70%. But this also benefits our rural schools because they have a tough time passing those school bond referendums when the farmers are having a hard time and they're going to have to pick up a significant part of it. The state helps these school districts out, and it helps the farmers in the way that this is implemented. So those three programs total $100 million. In addition, we are stepping up to help our local government partners in reducing their levies and meeting growing needs with an additional $73 million. We have historic major investments in local government aid and county program aid. Every single person in this room will benefit from increases that we've made in the county program aid program. And we have a new pension aid provision that will provide $13 million to every single public employee employing a tax jurisdiction across the state. So whether your city gets LGA or not, you're going to be getting pension aid relief to help you with making sure that your pensions and obligations are met without having to raise property taxes. Another benefit for property taxpayers. We heard a huge number of locally specific bills relating to lodging taxes, local option sales taxes, development proposals. I want to thank my committee. We were given 1 day a week to meet on Mondays. We lost 20% of our scheduled meetings to Monday holidays, and they stuck with me and came night after night so that we could hear from every single city, including the ones whose dreams got dropped last year when the bill got vetoed. And so I really want to honor my members and our staff for really stepping up to a long backlog on that. And we were able to help those cities with unique circumstances. We have also set up the framework for addressing future issues and that we have a study on the state assessed property issues. We've talked on the floor before about the Enbridge lawsuit on valuation and the impact that that could have on counties and cities and townships where the state has assessed the property and it's being challenged in the tax court. Those challenges and in other situations are still in the tax court, but while that's going on, we're getting the data we can to look at, are we doing the best way? What are other states doing so we can come forward with solutions that work for everyone when we return next year. We have a study on the impact of 4D low-income property taxes and their special for classification. What is the real impact on affordable housing? And we are going to look at a variety of issues that are non-budget issues that would cause potentially shifts between different types of classification that we just didn't have the time to look at this year when we were focusing on the budget issues. And so, but I think together we have $173 million in property tax assistance that I think we're all going to find our citizens and taxpayers will really appreciate. And with that, I think we should begin considering the other ideas.
There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Marquart moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment, and the amendment is coded A44.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. There are two technical items in here, and then the third one is more substantial. And what that does, it holds all of the cities harmless as far as local government aid. So we added this $30.6 million. There are about 79 cities that still would see decreases because falling off the formula. This corrects that. We did this back in 2013, so it's not uncommon that this does occur. So members, I'd ask for your support.
Any discussion to the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Poppy moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A19-0471.
Representative Poppy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This amendment permits the continuation of the agreed-upon allocation distribution of fire state aid between the Volunteer Firefighter Association and the City of Austin. That has been the agreed-upon process prior to 2013 when the law was changed. This language is in the pension bill but is being added here to be assured of another avenue for passage. I appreciate your support.
Any discussion to the amendment? Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a good amendment. I'd ask for your support.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Sundin moves to amend House File 2125, the second engrossment. Amendment is coded A19-0474.
Representative Sundin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I've been working on a project for the last few years to help the merging of fire districts, particularly in greater Minnesota, out in the rural areas where it's a struggle every day to get volunteers to come in. So these fire districts need to combine. We got halfway there with the pension issue, and I'm really glad of that. The second component is the funding of those districts, and I'm finding out that the only thing less desirable than a house fire is trying to get levy authority for a fire district. So I'm going to pull that amendment.
Representative Sundin withdraws his amendment. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A19-0476.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And this is from a bill I've had for a while. Basically, the formula for LGA includes extra money for cities with old housing. We heard the author and the property tax chair speak. They talked about investing in our people and affordable housing. This amendment is for quality affordable housing. That money that they're already getting because they have old housing should be spent on urban renewal, loans, whatever will make that housing better, more affordable, and help the city. Now, frankly, this should be done in the committee. I wanted to bring it up because we didn't get a hearing for this bill, and I will pull this bill.
Representative Quam withdraws his amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A19-0477.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is another bill that I have had for a while, which basically has a principle: we should be putting some of our money away for wastewater, for water treatment. And our cities should be doing that. It's tough. They see the short horizon and the costs. And this would incentivize that you set up part of LGA goes into a fund that will be a revolving fund, because over 30, 40, 50 years, every one of the cities is going to need to have access to that. And again, this is a bill that did not get a hearing and should be treated in committee, but we got to start thinking long-term with our wastewater treatment, and I do withdraw this amendment.
Representative Quam withdraws his amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment as amended, and the amendment is coded A19-0478.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. There is an amendment to the amendment which would move the dates out and make it so that we didn't have to throw it out because it violated one of the rules.
Representative Quam, there's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend his amendment to House File Number 2125, the second engrossment, and the amendment to the amendment is coded A19-0495.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would hope for support.
Representative Loeffler. Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd ask members to vote yes on this so Representative Quam could get the bill in the order in which he wants.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. To the underlying amendment, discussion. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And what this is set up to do is in greater Minnesota, and in fact, much of the state, we have lost our shop classes. We've lost the equipment. A lot of it is, time sensitive, so that there's newer equipment, new techniques, welding, CNC, etc. This is to say that if a local school district and a local business get together and the Department of Education supported the activity and it was an approved course, the hours, say it was 10 hours a week, whatever the rental would be for renting out the shop, that would be able to be subtracted from the taxes so that the schools would not have to pay for the equipment, the maintenance, the insurance, etc., and the community could have training and shop for their students. Thank you.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I ask you to vote no. It does shift funding into the next biennium. And also, we're trying to keep a bill as simple as possible on conformity, and this adds more complexity. So please vote no.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A19-0479.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And there's an amendment to do the same thing with this.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Quam moves to amend his amendment to House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. The amendment to amendment is coded A19-0496.
Representative Quam.
Thank you. I wish I could get support on amendment to amendment.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So members vote yes on this to allow Representative Quam to put the bill in the proper form.
All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The amendment to the amendment is adopted. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This is something that has actually passed, been in a couple of tax bills over the years and vetoed, and it's basically doing the same thing what we do for telecom. If you have above, I think it's 80% or 85% of your customers are going to use it for telephone service, you don't pay the sales tax. Frankly, internet service providers, it's the same general functionality, and it's saying, hey, we want to promote organic growth across the entire state. It's capital investive heavy, so that if you save the sales tax off of it, we'll have more companies giving broadband across the state, and it'll be new equipment because you're not going to waste money on old. It would help everyone and would augment the broadband bill that we already have. Thank you.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And while this and others that Representative Quam's bringing up are good causes, it does again shift funding into the next biennium, and we're trying to keep a bill simple. So please vote no, members.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Drazkowski moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A52.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, members, the A52 amendment takes some of the money out of the bill that is used to increase the working family credit and uses it to increase the subtraction for the income tax on Social Security benefits. It increases the subtraction for married couples by $2,700, which is larger than the increase in the subtraction that's in the bill, and then also increases the subtraction for singles by $2,010, which is larger than the subtraction in the bill. It would more than double the subtraction in the bill for the Social Security benefits, or the income tax on Social Security benefits. I'd appreciate your support for the amendment and stand for questions. Thank you,
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, we do both in our bill, both the working family credit and $23 million into cutting taxes on Social Security benefits for seniors. In our bill, 56% of all seniors will not pay any taxes on their Social Security benefits when in our bill. So members, please vote no.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would ask for a roll call on the
Representative Drazkowski requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I'll just point out the discussion was, and Chair Marquardt, thank you for your thorough discussion of the bill. I think you did a great job describing it. However, the notion that we're going to give tax cuts to people who never pay in taxes is quite, and this is not on you, Chair Marquardt, or anyone else in here, perennially, and the fact that we call it a tax credit in our bill or in our law, and I guess for those 20% that still do have a tax liability after they apply this refundable tax credit to their income taxes, for them, you could still call it a tax cut. But the reality is that 80% of the people receiving this refundable tax credit, 80% are going to receive money from other people that earned it when they didn't earn it themselves and not pay a dime in income taxes. So this is going to people who do not pay a dime in income taxes, and they receive money back from their taxes, money that was earned by someone else and taken from them. This is a redistribution scheme. We should call it something else, I think, in the future in our laws, but that's what we have here, and that's why we're going to, in the amendment, take it from this effort to, again, increase and give more money earned by someone else to somebody who's not paying in. And members, Minnesotans that I talk to can't understand this. And as a matter of fact, members, we have, I've got the table here that outlines the amounts. So if you combine both the working family credit, which is the Minnesota version, and the earned income credit, which is the federal version, and you are a family in Minnesota, you can get $8,000 or $9,000 of money paid by someone else who earned it into your pocket when you are paying zero to the state government, zero taxes. The bill here, members, increases that money for people who don't earn it and are paying no tax liability. That's why this amendment brings it from there and helps do what we need to do and finish off here, and that is get rid of, at some point, and this is a good step towards it, to get rid of the taxes, the income taxes on Social Security benefits. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. Nash votes aye. Detmer votes aye. There being 48 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Drazkowski moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A53.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. One of the other tax increases that we see in the bill, in addition to Chair Marquart outlined the huge tax increases to businesses that are in this bill, but in addition to that, we have an increase in the state general levy. And if you'll remember, members, 2 years ago, this body and the other body in this building, in coordination with the tax bill and the governor at that time, Governor Dayton, actually decreased the state general levy on Minnesota businesses. We also got rid of the inflator. There was an automatic increase on that general levy. Well, members, there's an inflator put back on it again. Some call it the super inflator. But what this would do is take money from, that increase in this, quote, working family credit and help us put the bill back in the shape of current law by getting rid of the super inflator on Minnesota businesses all across the state, small businesses in every town, in every corner of Minnesota. So I encourage your support for the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Members, I ask a no vote on this bill. First of all, on the CI property taxes, what we're doing in our bill doesn't affect the small businesses because the first $100,000 of value is exempt. But when you look at property tax increases over the years from 2002 until today, when the CI property tax was started, business property taxes have gone up 73%, but homeowners have gone up 124%, multifamily housing has gone up 133%, and farmland has gone up 300%. We need to provide a tax break for our working families who are seeing their property taxes go up, their child care costs go up, their tuition costs go up, their housing costs go up. Members, please vote no.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I encourage a yes vote. I think I remember correctly. I should look at staff back here. I think we may be the only state in the country that has a silly tax like this one. As a matter of fact, I saw fingers pointing, Madam Speaker. Am I supposed to look somewhere?
No, Representative Drazkowski, I was confirming that Representative Hertaus would like to speak after you. Representative Drazkowski.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. Maybe Representative Hertaus will correct me on some of my statements. But a business that has $101,000 of property, of business property, is a small business. A business that has $200,000 of business property is a small business. We are increasing the business taxes on small businesses throughout the state of Minnesota. In this bill, members, this amendment gets rid of this new tax increase in automatic inflator on small businesses all across our state. I encourage your support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would just like to correct a couple things that Chair Marquart said. Yes, it's true that local property taxes have gone up on residential and farms have gone up. They've also gone up on business, and you said that small businesses are exempt to $100,000. That's true, but that certainly implied that they weren't experiencing an increase as a result of this inflator that would go back on. All it does is exempt the first $100,000, but if you have an inflator on it, that still raises their tax bill. And members, lastly, in addition to all of the taxes we've talked about, whether they're school taxes, city taxes, or county taxes, commercial property pays a fourth property tax. So that's why it's important to make Minnesota competitive and keep our businesses here in Minnesota. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Representative Lucero.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'll just quickly add that $100,000, I think the first $100,000 on CI property being exempt, $100,000, think about residential property. Most of our homes are worth more than $100,000. $100,000 to small businesses is not anything that we should point to as some kind of a large tax break or that they're going to be sheltered from this tax increase. So I am very much in favor of the Drazkowski amendment. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Drazkowski moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. And the amendment is coded A54.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This amendment uses the same category of increase in spending in the bill that spends money on the working family credit and instead reduces in the current biennium, according to the bill, it gets rid of the increase, I guess, or restores the subtraction that's eliminated in the current biennium for the estate tax, and then it phases out completely the estate tax in the out biennium in 2022 and 2023. Encourage your support for the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Do I have the wrong amendment, Madam Speaker?
We're on the A54.
I read A55. Okay. Could you just play the tape later, Madam Speaker?
We all heard your well-stated argument for A55, so we can do that one fast. Representative Drazkowski, we're on the A54. We're ready.
Okay, the A54 is a tax on tips, Madam Speaker, members. About $16 million of income tax in the state of Minnesota is extracted from young people who work hard for tips in this state. This amendment will get rid of that income tax on tips, help liberate our young workers from the oppression of government and the sucking sound that is going into their wallet, and give them the ability to liberate from government, hopefully break free and find success in this state that makes it very difficult. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. the working family credit provides a credit, a very good one, to all workers. And a credit is always better than a subtraction. So members, remember, we provide $332 million of tax cuts for working families and senior citizens in this biennium in this tax bill. This is not needed, so please vote no.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would ask for a roll call on this amendment if I can get one.
Representative Drazkowski requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Unfortunately, I'm not seeing 15 hands. Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you. Well, it was a valiant effort, Madam Speaker, and I encourage your support on the amendment. Thank you.
All those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the A55 amendment.
Drazkowski moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. Amendment is coded A55.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I previously outlined this amendment. Again, it restores the subtraction for the estate tax in the, or the exemption, excuse me, for the estate tax in the current biennium and eliminates it completely in the out biennium. I appreciate your support for the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Albright moves to amend the Drazkowski amendment to House File Number 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A60.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A60, the amendment to A55, reinstates the changes to the working family credit in the Drazkowski amendment, but repeals the estate tax starting in the tails.
Further discussion to Representative Albright.
Madam Speaker, I would request a roll call on the amendment.
Representative Albright requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we appreciate Representative Albright's efforts to recognize that the working family tax credit is of value and should be restored as we consider this. It goes to 12% of all households statewide. In some of your counties, it's up to 20%. This is counted on by a lot of people. And while I will encourage you to support the Albright amendment to the amendment, I have a different view on the underlining amendment.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the Representative Albright's amendment to the amendment. I think it will make this one better. It will leave the, for those that want to keep the working family credit changes in the bill, it'll do that. And it will allow us to get rid of this tax that taxes dead people after they've been taxed and taxed and taxed to death in our state. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 129 ayes and 0 nays, the amendment to the amendment is adopted. To the underlying Drazkowski amendment, Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I urge a strong no vote on this. This would take away the basic benefits to many working families in order to benefit the richest 250 people who die in Minnesota.
Representative Drazkowski.
I'm going to see if I can get a roll call on this, Madam Speaker. I ask for a roll call if we can get one.
Representative Drazkowski requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands?
We're getting there.
It's pretty close. There are 15 hands.
Woohoo! Thank you, Madam Speaker.
There will be a roll call. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Members, please vote. Be a friend. Help your friends. Members, please vote. clerk will close the roll. There being 48 ayes and 79 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk.
O'Neill moves to amend House Bill number 2125, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A24.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the A24 would mandate the OLA to perform a study on the working family credit to determine an error rating. And that is because the working family credit mirrors the federal government's earned income tax credit, and they have found, the IRS has found a 22 to 26% error rate. We want to make sure that those who deserve the credit are actually receiving the credit. And I ask for your support, and I ask for a roll call, please. Madam.
Representative O'Neill requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Garofalo moves to amend the O'Neill amendment to House File 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A42.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And before I forget, I first request a roll call.
Representative Garofalo requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. There's been a lot of talk about fairness and who is paying taxes and who is not paying taxes. What my amendment does is very simple. It adds to our biennial tax incident study that it includes Social Security taxes, estate taxes, and income taxes. So that way we can have a true, accurate representation of who is bearing the cost of the government burden and who is paying taxes. I have heard the chair of the tax committee reference his justification for tax increases in this bill based off of who has received tax relief at the federal level. So clearly this meshes right in with the Marquart tax increase plan and gives us an opportunity to have a full picture of all the data. I expect the chair is going to get up and support this, and I would ask for members on both sides of the aisle to support this. Thank you.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. I urge you to vote no for two reasons. I'm sorry, Representative Garofalo, but the tax incident report deals with state and local taxes, which the tax committee has jurisdiction over. Taxes we have control on. And second, it would not be a complete picture what you have, Representative Garofalo, because it does not include excise taxes like gasoline, cigarettes, or other types of excise taxes. So members, please vote no.
Representative Garofalo.
Madam Speaker, my apologies, Representative Marquardt. We should have included the other taxes that are being raised by the DFL, such as the gas tax and other items, but this is just federal stuff, so I didn't think of including other tax increases.
The clerk will take the roll on the amendment to the amendment. All aboard. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 75 nays, the amendment to the amendment is not adopted. On the underlying amendment, any further discussion to the Representative O'Neill underlying amendment? It is the A24. Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, errors are not considered fraud in taxes. And in the working family tax credit and in the earned income tax credit program, where they found errors, it has typically been in a couple that separates, and they haven't yet had the courts sort through with them who gets what deduction, who gets whatever, and they both claim it, which is not allowed. And so the IRS or our state says, no, 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 only one of you gets this, and they work it out, and it gets corrected, and they never have that problem again. But you know the tension points in a divorce, sometimes people are not even talking to each other to talk about what they're doing or what the strategy is. And so this amendment should be voted down.
Discussion. The clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Albright moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A25.
Representative Albright.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The A25 amendment changes general fund to all funds in regard to a taxpayer receipt program Chair Marquart is implementing in this bill. And Madam Speaker, I believe that there are amendments to this amendment.
There are. There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hertaus moves to amend the Albright amendment to House File Number 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A28.
Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. According to the most recent tax incident study and the analysis of the governor's budget, it shows that the rhetoric of fair taxes really doesn't quite match the data that's in that report. And so this whole session, the DFL has been talking about how we need to make the tax code more fair. And what this amendment would do is simply add $100 million of a tax increase would require the Department of Revenue to mail out a tax incident report to each taxpayer. That's the amendment, Madam.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. And I think in here it wants to use the words regressive and so forth. We don't do that anywhere else in statute, so members, please vote no.
Representative Hertaus.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Hertaus requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 74 nays, the first amendment to the amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Garofalo moves to amend the Albright amendment to House File Number 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A30.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, members. And first, I would ask for a roll call.
Representative Garofalo requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Eklund. Members, there is data available from the Internal Revenue Service that shows what taxpayer migrations are occurring across the country. There is no dispute in this data. If you look back through the years, particularly since the 2013 tax increase, the number of high-income elderly households that are migrating out of the state of Minnesota is up. It's big. It's a lot. It's important that we have this data so we know the consequences on our tax code and how we're paying for government services. So this would mandate that the Department of Revenue present that IRS data on what is happening with taxpayer migration, and I ask for your support.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. Members, I'm going to ask you to vote no. We don't need this report. We have the numbers already. If you look at the February forecast, in the last 2 years, we've had net in-migration of about 7,000 each of the last 2 years. Also, if you look at the number of filers in the fourth tier, it actually has increased by 20% from 2013. You remember 2013 was when we put in the fourth tier? And I've got some quotes from that debate back in 2013. I'm not going to read them here, but it was talking about how all of this income was going to leave and how all of these people were going to flee the state. Well, they're back in that year, 2013, 60,000 tax filers were in that fourth tier. Today it's 73,000. It's gone up 20%. And just from 16 to 17, it went up 10%. Members, please vote no.
Representative Hertaus.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And although that is a true statement that migration has increased, that's not the measure you need to know with regard to the report. The report requires that you know what the net taxable gross income is. That's the true measure of what's going on with regard to our tax policy and what kind of migration is occurring. So that report is available, and I'll tell you what it is. For every dollar that's leaving the state of Minnesota right now, and this is current data, only 84 cents is coming back to Minnesota of net taxable adjustable gross income with regard to migration. So those are the numbers. Don't be fooled by the numbers of people. The issue is the amount of taxable gross income. Thank you, members.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Representative Marquart, you are wrong. Over $400 million is leaving the state in the most recent data we have. This is why we need the report. We can't make informed decisions when the tax chair is mistaken about the amount of migration of total wealth leaving our state. So I would ask for a yes vote on this, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
O'Neill moves to amend the Albright Amendment to House File Number 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A56.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the A56 amendment is actually Representative Gomez's bill, House File 2811, and unfortunately she's not on the floor. I was really hoping she would be here, but I'll tell you what the bill does quickly and what this amendment does. It sets up a tax expenditure advisory commission to make suggestions to us as to which expenditures that we should keep or allow to expire. Let me give you some examples. In the bill, it talks about sunsetting expenditures depending on their type, whether it was gas, sales, motor vehicle sales, expenditures. Those would expire in 2022. Motor fuels, gambling tax, tobacco, liquor, and solid waste taxes would expire in 2024. Some examples of tax expenditures, if you're not familiar because you're not on the tax committee, would be the working family credit, property tax refunds, renter's credit, sales tax exemptions on food and clothing, sales tax exemptions on medications, sales tax exemptions on farm equipment, sales tax exemptions for local governments, sales tax exemptions on gas, and property tax exemptions. So these are just a few of the examples, and in this amendment and in her bill, she has some specific dates when things already do expire. And so this is something that has been brought up several times by the other side of the aisle, and I just wanted to have this conversation. And I know, Chair Marquart, you and I had a quick conversation, and it's not something that you did put in the tax bill, so I'm assuming that there's a reason, but I would recommend to my side to vote no, and I would like a roll call, please. Thank you.
Representative O'Neill requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. And Representative O'Neill, thank you for bringing this forward, because this is exactly what we have to do. And a few years ago, there was a task force that looked at all of these things. I know this bill came in late, and so it never was heard. But it is something next year that we're going to do immediately, because it's an area we have to look at. In fact, we had a little task force that was set up to look at that. But it's not quite ready for prime time, so members, please vote no.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll.
What's going on? Joe? Joe?
There being 3 ayes and 126 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. To the underlying Albright amendment, Representative Albright.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to withdraw the amendment at this time.
Representative Albright withdraws his amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Johnson moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A50.
Representative Johnson.
Madam Speaker, members, over the past few days, I've struggled with this amendment. If this amendment is adopted, East Central Regional Library is not going to move. It's still going to be in Cambridge. This deals with the local option sales tax in my district, the City of Cambridge, to provide a building for the East Central Regional Library, parks and roads. That's where the problem is, parks and roads. And I know that the library task force and the people worked very hard to pass this referendum the second time around. First time around, it did fail. And when they talked to me the first time, I said I'd give them one opportunity, which I did, and it failed with less than 45% of support. Had some stipulations. It had to be a single topic. It must pass before I'd offer the bill. And again, they only had one opportunity, and it failed. In 2017, the City of Cambridge again decided to do a local option sales tax to provide a building, not for the East Central Regional Library, for the Cambridge Library, that's operated by Isani County through the East Central Regional Library Board, that the citizens of Isani County pay about $500,000 a year for operations. But in order to get it to pass, they had to put in parks and roads in their local option sales tax. And yes, it did pass in 2018. But doing some research on this, I've been hunting, trying to find the definition and the requirements for a local option sales tax that's used for capital improvements. Guess what? The only place I can find capital improvements is in 2 different statutes. I believe it is in 475 statutes and 373 statutes. One deals with counties, and one deals with some other bonding. And they cannot be used for roads and parks. Local option sales tax, as far as I can find anywhere in the Minnesota statutes, cannot be used for roads and parks. In fact, we had to add a bill to allow counties to do a local option sales tax specifically for roads and parks, because local option sales tax cannot be used for roads and parks. We also had to add a bill so the first-class cities could build ball stadiums because parks can't be used. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to ask for your support, because if we allow this, unfortunately, if we allow this to go on because it wasn't done properly, every city we have to rewrite the statutes to allow all cities to do that, or just remove those requirements. So I do hope for your support, because we need to make sure cities that do local option sales tax do them properly.
Representative Loeffler.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, as I mentioned in my introduction, we heard all of the local option sales taxes that any city had proposed and wanted to have considered. And we heard from a lot of different city officials, including those from Cambridge, who came and shared with us the process that they use, that 62% of the public had voted for this and wanted it, and that it did not seem dissimilar from all the others that we were approving at the time, and so we included it in the bill. We did hear and have in the past authorize city local option sales taxes for park improvement, park trails, roads, particularly of regional significance. We're trying to clarify the statutes even more, but none of the lawyers in House research who have dealt with this for years and years, decades even, raised the issue that you are raising. And so I will leave it to members to deal with it, but we did try and honor our commitment to hear from every city and to treat every city that had passed one with their voters the same.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Petersburg moves to amend House File Number 2125, and the amendment is coded A34.
Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This bill is fairly simple, and Chair Marquart, I'm not asking for roll call because I'm very confident that you'll accept this as a friendly amendment. But this really refers to two different reports that I think are very important, especially in this day and age. One of them deals with GILTI, which is the Global Intangible Low Taxed Income and Deferred Foreign Income. And the reason why I believe a report is important because this is new, part of it because the repatriation programs that are going on, and we really don't know how that's going to work. And so I think it's important for us to do that. That's in Article 1. In Article 5, which is the last half of this amendment, we're asking for a report on affordable housing programs, a report for low-income housing. We've heard a lot throughout this session about how we don't have enough housing for low income. And so I think it's important for us to have a base, a starting point, to really know whether or not we're improving into the future. And so this is a very simple bill for these two reports, and I please ask for your support.
There's an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
O'Neill moves to amend the Petersburg Amendment to House File Number 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A47.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thought maybe you would do the other one first, but that would make more sense. But in any case, the A47 requires a commissioner of MMB to make cuts to the executive branch if all or some of the foreign income tax gathered is found to be unconstitutional. So Representative Marquart had talked about, Chair Marquart had talked about the foreign income tax, and it's similar to Representative Hornstein's bill, but not quite the same. It's a little bit different. But we had quite a long, protracted conversation in tax committee, and one of the conversations was this actually constitutional? And I know that you had some data and some information to think that it was constitutional to be able to do this. And just really quickly, an example of what this is kind of doing, I know Chair Marquart, you tried to explain, but very simply, it's saying if you've got a company that is headquartered here in Minnesota, for example, like Cargill or 3M, and they have operations all over the world, there is an option in this particular foreign income tax that they could opt in to say that they can include all of their the income that they would receive all over the world and be taxed here in Minnesota. So this is just to make sure that if this is found to be unconstitutional, then the MMB executive branch would take care of any revenue loss. And I ask for a roll call.
Representative O'Neill requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the A47. Representative Marquart.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'm going to ask for a no vote for two reasons. And one is that if we have a recession and revenues go down, we don't have anything set up that you automatically make cuts. And that has happened in the past, so we wouldn't do that. But second, there are two Supreme Court cases, the Container Corporation case versus the California Franchise Tax Board and the Barclays case, that both affirm the worldwide combined reporting method that is for sure one of the options here in this bill. So there's no reason to do this, members. I would ask for a no vote.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So this is only if this was to be found unconstitutional, and there seemed to be quite a bit of assurity in the committee that this in fact was constitutional, and this is a stopgap measure, so if it's found unconstitutional, that there's some way to remedy it, and I'd ask for your support.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 75 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
O'Neill moves to amend the Petersburg Amendment to House File 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A45.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I want to talk just a little bit more about the foreign income tax because we are very unique here in Minnesota. We have 19 Fortune 500 companies. The other states around the nation that have implemented this haven't done it exactly as it is in this bill, as Chair Marquart had already said. But one thing to note is those states that have implemented this have either no or maybe one or two Fortune 500 companies. And so this really doesn't affect them to the level that it is affected here in Minnesota. And in light of that, because we have such great companies here, we have so many headquartered here, this would give them a little bit of a little tax credit. And so if they are going to be paying and opt in and pay this tax credit, or excuse me, tax provision, then they would get a refund against their statewide general property tax liability. And this would go into effect in FY22. And I ask for a roll call.
Representative O'Neill requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I ask for your support.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. I would ask for a no vote. Again, you know, it's very constitutionally sound. But the other thing I want to mention is, as I mentioned before, we have great corporations that are very friendly, great partners in this state. And combined with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, where the corporate rate was reduced by 40%, combining those cuts with what we're doing in this tax bill, according to information gleaned from the Committee on Joint Taxation, is that corporations in Minnesota, between the federal and the state bills, will still see an annual tax cut of about $900 million. And pass-through businesses will see tax cuts between federal and state of over $600 million. So members, please vote no.
Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, that's true, but that affects every single business in the United States, and this would affect only Minnesota. And unfortunately, what that would do, members, is it would make our Minnesota companies, and remember I told you 19 Fortune 500 companies, it would make them uncompetitive globally. They are incredibly concerned. There was a large group, I can't remember how many, a couple hundred, I believe, were on the list of people of companies that were incredibly concerned about this particular tax. It would make them an outlier, it would make them uncompetitive globally, and we certainly don't want to make that any more challenging. In this and other taxes that are being raised, it's an already very challenging business tax environment here in Minnesota, and this would just further make it worse. And so we would like to keep those Fortune 500 companies here in Minnesota, and this would go in the wrong direction. I ask for your support.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 75 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. To the underlying Petersburg Amendment, Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm looking over to Chair Marquart to see if he might be willing to accept that. I don't see him saying yes, but I do hope that we can have these reports looked at next year and maybe figure out, if we do have some base for these. And so with that, Madam Speaker, I'll withdraw the amendment.
Representative Petersburg withdraws his amendment. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
New moves to amend House File Number 2125, the second engrossment. The amendment is coded A27.
Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. This amendment would require the Office of the Legislator Auditor to audit the working family tax credit to determine an error rate. It would also require that $50,000 of the $1 million border city aid in the bill has to go to Taylor's Falls. The working family tax credit mirrors the federal government's earned income tax credit. The IRS estimates a credit error rate of 22 to 26%. The federal error rate, by some estimates, costs the taxpayers $15 billion a year. We should take the steps to just see exactly how tight the controls are on this program and to make sure the dollars in Minnesota that our taxpayers are sending us are getting to where we intend them to go. In addition, Taylor's Falls experiences the exact same problems on the eastern side of our state that the border cities on the western side of our state experiences. Taylor's Falls is similarly situated to a larger city directly adjacent across the river, and we are bleeding business in Chisago County. We are bleeding business. Members, I ask for a yes vote on this, and I ask for a roll call, Madam Speaker.
Representative New requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. There's an amendment to the amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Marquart moves to amend the new amendment to House File Number 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A59.
Representative Marquart.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. This amendment would shift dollars to the angel investment credit. The angel investment credit, studies have shown, actually works. In fact, from 2010 to 2012, according to a study by the Department of Revenue, it actually produced $72 million of investment that would not have been there but for this incentive. So, members, I'd ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to request a roll call.
Representative Davids requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Davids.
Thank you. I'd respectfully ask for a no vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 76 ayes and 53 nays, the motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. To the new underlying amendment, there's no more amendments to the amendment? There's one more amendment to the amendment? There's one last amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment.
Hertas moves to amend the new amendment to House File 2125. The amendment to the amendment is coded A48.
Representative Hertas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Marquart, I want to thank you for working with me and Representative Laufer in the Tax Committee and hearing the bill in the Tax Committee. as well as in the Property Tax Committee. Members, there has been for a number of decades a structural problem with the local government aid formula. Over decades, what happens is that eventually cities go off a formula, and about every 10 years or so, we have to tweak the formula in order to make sure that communities are getting some of the local government aid that was intended to go towards them. In particular, over the last 7 years, I've identified a serious problem with regard to the fairness and the equity with regard to the local government aid formula program. Members, at present, there are about 835 cities in the state of Minnesota. 95 cities, or roughly almost 20%, have gone off formula. And currently there's 95, as I mentioned. Next year it's projected to be about 101 cities that will actually be off of formula. In these 95 cities, these communities are contributing to the state general fund in the form of sales tax revenues within their jurisdictions, and with regard to the state general levy, nearly $1.5 billion to the general fund, yet they get no assistance from the local government aid program. Now, for those of you who weren't familiar with the inception of the LGA formula and the program, initially it was started and there was a pretty much distributed to each community throughout the state based on a per capita basis. Over the decades, special needs were created, the formula was more complicated, and as time goes on, the cities get bumped off of that formula. So members, this issue always comes up as to whether or not these cities are wealthy or whether they're not, whether they deserve any money. The fact of the matter is we have a great disparity between Class 4 cities, which are by definition under 10,000 people in population, with a very limited or low amount of tax capacity. And then we also have very large cities that have a lot of tax capacity and able to generate revenue for a lot of those needs. Now, when I first proposed this bill, I fully funded the governor's request, as did the House majority here with regard to their LGA proposal, and I've worked with both of the chairs extensively in trying to get support for this. And what it would have done is would have increased, for Pay 2020, would have increased the amount of revenue under LGA for every city in the state of Minnesota. Every city would have seen an increase. But instead, the formula was not accepted. It basically creates a safety net so that in the future, no other city would go off formula. If you didn't qualify for the original formula, you would then qualify for the alternate formula. And it took 2% of that entire LGA appropriation would be then distributed through an alternate formula that was comprised of base aid on a per capita basis, and then once the base aid was paid, then the remainder of all of the monies would be distributed on a per capita basis to every community. And those 95 cities represent about 1.3 million, or a little more than 20% of the entire state of Minnesota. So in the spirit of the governor's One Minnesota campaign promise, what this effort was trying to do is make sure that all Minnesota cities and all Minnesota citizens are contributing and receiving some benefit from that program. This amendment has been amended to pare down the maximum formula or the maximum cap for each city. And it also changed because of the conversations I've had with Chair Marquart on the funding for the tax bill, took basically LGA money that would be any library aid that would be sent to the city of Minneapolis, that money would come back into the program and would fund the other 95 cities. So that's kind of how the program was designed, and I appreciate some of the commitments and the promises I've had from the tax chair. With that, members, I would remind you that there are many members on the other side of the aisle, have a lot of cities that do not get any regular local government aid, and my formula would address that. And I would ask for a roll call, Madam Chair.
Representative Hertaus requests a roll call. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Hertaus.
And that pretty much sums it up. And I'm sure Chair Marquart will tell you to vote against this, but nonetheless, thank you for the introduction.
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Hertaus, we're always open to new ideas and thinking about them. But the tradition and the history of local government aid has been we really work with all the city organizations and try and come up with collaborative adjustments based on a measure of need. It historically has always, even as the formula has changed, been in part a tax-based equalization to recognize that there's wealthy communities and better able to meet their needs locally, and other communities don't have that tax base and need some assistance to meet the basic needs of their people. There's never been a proposal that I'm aware of that heavily uses per capita as the basis for it. And you're right, every few years we need to look at whether it's working right, whether the factors need to be tweaked or adjusted, but the cities have not asked for this change at this point. They're pretty happy with the increases that are coming forward, and I would encourage people to vote no on this proposal at this time. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 54 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. To the underlying new amendment, Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I withdraw my amendment.
Representative New withdraws her amendment. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 2125, as amended.
Third reading, discussion. Nobody has to say anything. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And first of all, Madam Speaker and members, if there's one thing we learned from this bill today, there's one thing we can all agree on, it's this. Representative Paul Marquart loves the House DFL caucus. We know Representative Marquart loves the House DFL caucus, and I say that because it reminds me of a popular series, Game of Thrones. And particularly, there's a character by the name of Jaime Lannister. And I don't mean that Representative Marquart is the Kingslayer, or he's got a sister named Cersei, or any of that goofy stuff. Okay, I don't mean that. But there is a line from that movie, or from that TV series, that Jaime Lannister says that's completely appropriate to Representative Marquart, and I can't help but imagine he has said privately to the House DFL caucus. And for those of you that watch Game of Thrones, you'll know this. If you don't, this will be meaningless. But I can't help but think that Representative Marquart has looked at his caucus and said what Jaime Lannister said when he pushed Brandon Stark out the window, the things I do for love. So in serious, Madam Speaker and members, reasonable people can disagree about the size and scope of government, the amount of taxation there is. I think you guys tax too much, you spend too much. I want a smaller government with lower taxes. However, we should all agree that volatility is a bad thing. And what this bill does, and the DFL has done year after year, is relied a larger amount of our tax code on a smaller and smaller base of wealthy individuals and businesses. And that volatility causes problems. Whether it's migration that takes place, or if you end up having a recession. And in fact, I've passed out to you a handout from a previous economic forecast where you can see it says when combined with the assumed reductions in interest and dividend income, more than 90% of the decline in tax year 2008 income tax liability is explained. And so when you rely on more and more of the government services coming from a smaller and smaller group of people, this puts volatility into our forecast. It actually requires MMB to take this into account and increase the budget reserve even more. And that's something that I hope members on the DFL side will take into consideration in this tax bill and in future tax bills. And so, Madam Speaker, members, I'll be voting no on this bill. There are only 25 days left until this session is adjourning. And we are not getting closer, we're getting farther away with bills like this. And I would urge members to vote no, and let's get our job done. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative New.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What we're seeing tonight is just another part of your tax hike crusade. You are raising taxes $12 billion in these omnibus bills. You're raising the cost of health care, you're raising the cost of filling up the tank, which of course makes it more expensive for everyone to get to work, to get to school, to get to the grocery store. Just this week, we saw an analysis, a revenue analysis, that showed that the governor's plan, which is of course very similar to your Democrat plan, hurts low-income Minnesotans more than anyone else. Those Minnesotans making less than $45,000 a year are going to see double-digit increases in their tax liability. Double-digit. The Dems talk a lot about fairness. There's nothing fair about this bill. This bill stacks the deck against Minnesota families to enrich the government. It demonizes employers, and I'm not talking about big, evil corporations. I'm talking about my hairdresser, who owns her own little shop on Main Street in Lindstrom, Minnesota. That's who this bill hurts. You make villains of our employers to justify your tax hikes. And your tax relief barely scratches the surface. It's a token. It doesn't even touch the taxes you're raising everywhere else. Again, families making less than $45,000 a year are going to see double-digit increases in their tax liability. You know, the reality is that your tax hikes won't just hurt businesses and rich people. They are hurting our lowest income Minnesotans more than anyone else. That's who is hurt by this bill. Your bill raises taxes on the people who can least afford it. $12 billion in tax increases across all of these bills. This tax bill makes life more expensive for families. Now, thank heavens this bill will not become law. Thank heavens for the GOP Senate that is willing to protect Minnesota families. Members, I'm going to be voting no on this.
Representative Hertas.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Thanks for the quick work tonight, and we'll certainly get home before midnight. And I would just like to share with you, when I first came here 7 years ago, one of my passions was I wanted to be on HHS. That didn't happen. But I have since really enjoyed working in the tax and finance areas, and I've certainly enjoyed the relationships that I've made with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle on the tax committee. But members, what I really want to appeal to you about is the whole understanding about how Minnesota really isn't competitive anymore with our neighboring states, as well as where our rankings are in the nation. And we oftentimes talk about the quality of life in Minnesota, but I can tell you I've traveled all over this country, I own property in other states, and I can tell you the quality of life isn't so bad in some of the other places. And I mentioned earlier tonight that we're actually experiencing a net loss of taxable gross income each and every year out of Minnesota. We're losing, and when we're continuing to grow government and grow the size of government, when we're losing adjusted gross income, taxable gross income, we're going to find ourselves in the deficit situation that Chair Marquart has already outlined. But just some highlights to give you an idea of where we're at. If you have been born and raised here as I have, you don't know that it's any different anywhere else. But you should be aware that our lowest income tax rate on our lowest income earners is higher than the maximum taxable rate in 23 other states. So members, I'm trying to make you understand that the tax hikes that are in this bill are hitting the hardest working, lowest income individuals. The $12 billion of increases is really making life more difficult for Minnesotans, and it's not painting a good direction in terms of where we're going long term. So what we're doing is making life more expensive for all hardworking Minnesota families. And so I'd like you to keep that in mind. I want to continue working with you through the rest of this biennium to move us to be a more competitive state with regard to attracting business, having a healthy and vibrant business economy, because that's where all of us get our revenue from. Not only us as families, we work for companies, our incomes, but state government is the recipient when we have a healthy business economy. So I look forward to working with you, Chair Marquart, Chair Loeffler, and hopefully we can get some things done. I don't see any chance that this bill, as being passed tonight, is going to be what is going to come out of this legislative session. Thank you, members.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair Marquart, Chair Loeffler, for your efforts on this bill. Chair Marquart, you in your committee did bring forward tax conformity, not the type of tax conformity that we brought a couple of years ago. If you'll remember, actually a year ago, we brought tax conformity, and you have the adjusted gross income change, which I think is going to benefit our state a long time down the road. When the federal government starts changing things again, we won't have to be responded and bouncing around here in the legislature and find that our inaction will have consequences, at least to the extent that we do now. So if that gets adopted, that's a good thing. I think it will. And I think the discussion we had last year and your work in committee this year will accomplish a good thing in that. However, Chair Marquart and members of the Tax Committee, you have a situation ahead of you where you have an insatiable appetite for spending that the House Democrats have brought forward in their huge spending bills that you saw and we've seen in the education bill, in the Health and Human Services bill, in the jobs bill that came. You'll see the transportation bill and the public safety bill and others coming forward. All of them have huge spending increases, and in order to pay for that, Mr. Chairman, what you have to do is you have to increase taxes, and that's what you did in the bill. It's a $1.3 billion increase just in this bill on hardworking Minnesotans, the productive people in the state that make this state go, are unfortunately going to have more money sucked out of their wallet, money that's intended to pay their bills and try to get their families ahead. I don't know if they're going to stay in this state any longer, members. Many of them are flocking and fleeing to Florida and other places, and I appreciate the amendments that were brought forward to try to get a better measure on those. I think we really need to know what the consequences of our action are here that we bring forward. But we have a bill that brings taxes on hardworking business owners, hardworking employees, on people who smoke, on people who die, on people who retire. We are taxing everybody in this tax bill in order to squeeze more of the life out of them and transfer it to government. And Mr. Chairman, you have to do that because that's how the numbers work out here. You're in a socialist caucus that wants to spend money on everything and make government the center of the universe here in Minnesota. And so if you're going to do that, you have the job of taking the money from the people of Minnesota, and that's what this bill does, is it takes money from people, more money against their will, and distributes it in ways that they very likely would not. But thank you so much for your efforts and your collegiality. I appreciate working with both of you, and thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I'd like to start out with some positive things because I'm just a positive kind of guy. This bill does have some very, very positive aspects in it. I'd like to just go over those briefly. One of the very positive aspects is the school building ag credit going from 40%, which was kind of like first in the nation type stuff that Chair Drazkowski and you, Chair Marquart, did a great job on. 40%, that was in the 2017 tax bill. This tax bill, thank you, Chair Loeffler, goes to 70%. That's a big, big deal. Because as you know, what happens is you try to pass a school bond referendum in a small town. If it's an excess levy override, it's house, garage, and 1 acre. But for years, I would try to get house, garage, and 1 acre on the bonding for a building. And finally, Chair Drazkowski and Chair Marquart were able to do that at a 40% level. You're going to 70. I'd like to see it 100, but 70 is better than 40 where I come from. Full Section 179 conformity, that's a big deal to our businesses, small businesses, farms. That's one of the first things most of you members, I'm sure, have heard from your business constituents. Increasing the Social Security subtraction that we started in 2017. I went as far as I could in 2017. Chair Marquart and the tax committee take it a bit further, which is a good thing. And remember, members, too much of a good thing, well, it's a good thing. There's a country song there somewhere, isn't there? I'm sure there is. Okay, so increasing the standard deduction, which we've done on the 2018 tax bill. Chair Marquart, I would like to thank your partisan staff, Mr. Jessen, the crew back there, amazing to work with. Very, very good to work with. And of course, the dream team, House nonpartisan research. We just really have the best folks to work with there. Republican staff, yes, even Rubus. Amazing. Stephen Rubus is an amazing asset to this body. Chair Marquart, you were put in a very, very tough situation. Now, as you said, you did cut taxes, the $600 million, but to do that, we're raising over $3 billion. So, you know, everything you said was correct, but to raise taxes $3 billion to get $600 million in relief, well, you know, I was first in my class, but it was quite a small class, and that's not a very good deal. So with that being said, $600 million in cuts, $3 billion in increases just in this bill, as Leader New said, it's $12 billion in increases overall. That's a lot. I woke up this morning, and members, on August 10th of 2010, I had quadruple bypass surgery. So every morning when I get up, I pray to the good Lord for two things. One is I thank God that I got up, and then I thank God that we have to balance our budgets in this state. All states except one, I think it's Connecticut, we have to balance our budget. That's a great thing. We're a long way from getting this done, but it's a step forward. We'll go to conference, hopefully, and get a bill back that will work for us all. Now, a few concerns. Well, so I wake up this morning, and I thank God that I woke up and that we balance our budgets. And front page above the fold, this is today's paper, and we can't use props, can we? Wall's tax plan hits the poor the hardest. Now, I know that this is Chair Marquart's tax bill. Governor Walz had his proposals. I requested that be scored. With the tax incidence study, it was. And we find that even a taxpayer making $45,000 or less gets hit with double-digit tax increases. That's what the tax incidence study shows, because we have very regressive taxes: corporate tax, motor fuels tax, cigarette tax, and the sick tax. Very, very regressive. Very problematic to be raising taxes on the poorest of the poor. So there's a few concerns I have. The DFL budget raises taxes by $12 billion. The tax bill about $3 billion itself. It's very similar to Governor Walz's budget. It's not line for line, but it is quite similar. The Minnesota Department of Revenue has determined that the budget is highly regressive. That's from the department. meaning it hurts the working and the middle class more than the rich, and I don't want to hurt anybody. That same analysis also said the governor's budget raised taxes on all income tax levels, not just the rich. Was this what the DFL meant when they said they wanted to make taxes fair? I don't believe so. Dr. Laura Kolumbakidis, I was scared I couldn't say it. Dr. Laura Kolumbakidis, state economist, has stated multiple times that corporate taxes and capital gains taxes are the most volatile taxes the state has. In fact, after the recession of 2008, those taxes, the income from those went down 40%. And so members, we're basing this basically on a house of cards. So those would be my concerns. There are some good things in here. But Chair Marquart, you ran a very, very fair committee, and I thank you very much for that. We in the minority like to get bills heard too, and you did. In fact, the first bill you heard was a Republican bill, and I appreciate that. And I just want to say for the members that Chair Marquart is the second best tax chair we've had in the last decade. And no, not Ellen Chesky. No, she's not more. No. Ellen Chesky is good too. She is good too. So I just want to review for you, and we're going to make it in time. I have a history, of course, of naming tax bills. And I just want to go through that history. And then I'll have the top 5 finalists for this year. And I know you're waiting with great anticipation. 2011, smoking hot tax bill. And it was. 2013, Chair Chesky, a Foreigner song, Cold as Ice. Your $2 billion in tax increases, you're willing to sacrifice our love. 2016, Don't Stop Believing. Was that an awesome tax bill? Don't Stop Believing. Well, when the governor vetoed it, I stopped. 2017, tax bill signed an amazing tax bill. Remember what that one was? The bills. Help. No. Come together right now over my tax bill for tax reform. Yeah, that's what it was, yes. 2018, I could see a train wreck coming. That was the brothers Osborne. It ain't my fault. That was, so the top 4 that didn't make it this year were Foreigner, Who's Crying Now? Cole Swindell, She Ain't Worth the Whiskey. REO Speedwagon, Riding the Storm Out. In the minority, that's kind of what we do. We're riding the storm out. Justin Moore, You Look Like I Need a Drink. That's that one. But the tax bill for 2019, again from the Beatles, written by George Harrison. Tax Man. Let me tell you how it will be. There's one for you, 19 for me, because I'm the tax man. Yeah, I'm the tax man. Should 5% appear too small, be thankful I don't take it all, because I'm the tax man. Yeah, I'm the tax man. If you drive a car, I'll tax the street. If you try to sit, I'll tax your seat. If I get too cold, I'll tax your heat. If you take a walk, I'll tax your feet. Don't ask me what I want it for. If you don't want to pay some more, because I'm the tax man, yeah, I'm the tax man. Now, my advice for those who die, declare the pennies on your eyes. Because I'm the tax man, yeah, I'm the tax man, and you're working for no one but me. So with that, again, Chair Marquart, great to work with you. A great tax committee. We did some good things. We did some things that I have concerns about. So with that, I'll turn it over back to the Speaker.
Representative Loeffler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And I, too, think I should offer a couple of thank yous, including to my leads from the other parties, Representative Hertaus and Representative Drzkowski. And thank you so much for being willing to keep the communication lines open, working things out, keeping the committee moving when we needed to, so we never once had a local official who had to come back another day after traveling down to St. Paul, even though we sometimes met on some of the worst days. We did have one witness who said he was kind of looking forward to the blizzard. I don't know what was going on in his life, but I was not wishing that on anyone who came before our committee. As has been said before, our staff is amazing. The A-team from House Research is absolutely astounding. Anytime you just almost start to breathe a question about numbers, our fiscal analysts are right there with not only sometimes their accurate number for right this year, but some of the history, if that's going to be useful as well. And our partisan staff and our committee administrator and committee legislative assistants and have all proven amazing in dealing with a really complicated bill in a short amount of time. And so I'm just privileged to work with them and the members of my committee who just hung in there and worked things out and kept things moving, and we had some good debates and discussion. And I am really proud that this bill does step up to address, again, rebuilding the partnership with our local governments so that they can deliver the kinds of services that we all count on, whether you live in a tax-poor part of the state or a state with aging infrastructure, and that you can do that in a way with taxes, property taxes that are manageable, and that we provide $100 million in direct property tax refunds to renters and homeowners in a way that over 1 million people will get a refund directly into their bank account, and I think that's a good step forward. But you heard a lot of the good stuff before. Representative Garofalo isn't here, but he talked about volatility and the volatility for the state government, and I think we should worry a little bit about that. But I want to talk about how this bill, in all of its components, deals with the volatility in low and moderate and middle-income families that are constantly confronted with volatility in their personal income and their personal budget on a weekly or monthly basis, and how this bill steps forward to help get them a breath of fresh air so they can right their finances and keep moving forward. Because we've got a lot of people in every single one of your districts who are living on the edge, whether they're in those low-wage jobs, whether they're still in a better paying job, but they've got so much college loans, they're never going to feel like they could live like that. Or they're a senior citizen who cringes every time they get that property tax statement and wonder if they can make it through the next year without going to the food shelf. And those people say on a regular basis, is there enough? Can I or we handle this? This is when the landlord is raising the rent because the property taxes went up. And what are we going to do to make that up? There's almost no place to move to that's any cheaper in our area. A tire got blown out in the pothole when I was coming home from work. When can I fix that? The credit cards are at the max. The toll was more than I could handle. I hope I can get through taking, if you're lucky, you're in an area with a bus, but we know a lot of the parts of the state don't have that option. So you're going to try and bum rides till you can save up enough money to get a new tire. It's the child has a fever. Can I afford? Is it going to get better? Can we wait till morning? Should I go to the ER? I know how much that copay is going to be. And oh my God, with the crummy insurance we have right now, this could be really tough. And college students who think about dropping out because they're working so many hours it's impacting their grades. We step up in our budget to help all these people stabilize their lives. But it's the working family tax credit, it's the property tax refund, it's the components of this budget that look out for people who have to live with volatility in their budget every day. And I'm just honored to have had a chance to play a part in this and to have a chairman who really has focused his bill on working families, working individuals, farmers, people who are making our state economies work and doing it in a way that I think we all can be proud of. So thank you much to everyone, and thank you, Chair Marquart, for the chance to serve with you.
Representative Marquart.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker and members. And this bill is really about the future, building a great future. This is a great state. It's got some great momentum. Let's keep the foot on the pedal in moving us forward, because we took a real focus in this bill and we went all out for our families and our senior citizens and our farmers and our small businesses. We have a great state. We have a great people in the state. We all want that here. And I truly believe that this bill, this tax bill, will make a great state, the great state of Minnesota, even better. Members, I'd ask for your support.
Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for, I think, a very good 24 hours in the Minnesota House of Representatives. I want to thank Republican leadership, both Minority Leader Dowd and Deputy Minority Leader New, and all of you for working with us to do our work in an orderly fashion. Obviously, we do not agree on many of the important issues in front of us, and we can have strong and lengthy debate, but the fact that we were able to put these two bills together today and stay on target towards a May 1st deadline, which we have agreed to with the Senate Republicans and with the governor, is very important that we, for the purpose of getting done in a timely manner, if we can at all do that. And I just appreciate your work in helping us achieve that today. And I'm also very proud of the work of the Tax Committee and Representative Marquart and Representative Loeffler and all the members and all the staff. This is the centerpiece of the DFL budget. All of the budget bills that we are going to be passing depend on this bill. And this is a great tax bill. I don't have a song for you, Representative Davids, except maybe "We Are the Champions." And we are all champions in Minnesota. We are a state of great abundance. We are a state of tremendous wealth. The people of this state, in every corner of it, extracting resources from mines to agriculture, adding value through agribusiness, through advertising, through investment, through technology and innovation, medical devices. There is no end to the abundance that Minnesota provides. And one sign of that abundance is that just this evening, the Star Tribune has a report out showing that the CEO of United Healthcare made $65.6 million last year in capital gains. That's in healthcare, members. And so we have a state of great abundance, and we can afford to both take care of the people who are vulnerable and need our support, and we can afford to invest in the next generation of workers through early learning, K-12, and higher education. We can afford to do it if we have the courage. And I want to applaud Representative Marquart especially for leading us there with this bill. In a state of this kind of resources, in an economy that is dependent on education and public investment and transportation, in so many ways, it is only fair that those who benefit the most from this economy help to reinvest in it. And so, members, we are proud to bring this bill forward. We are proud to give Minnesotans a choice between a high quality of life, great education, great transportation, great health care that's affordable and accessible to people, and we are willing to tell Minnesotans what it costs to deliver that. It's an honest budget. It is a budget that will serve the needs of the state. It reflects our values. It reflects many of your values, and we need to pay for it. So, members, I would ask you to support our bill tonight and look forward to a greater state in the future through this bill and through this whole budget. Thank you.
The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 74 ayes and 55 nays, the motion prevails. The bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. Without objection, we will revert to messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Madam Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate following Senate file herewith transmitted. Senate file number 2227, and the message is signed Cal R. Ludeman.
First reading of Senate files.
First reading of Senate Files, number 2227, an act relating to the operation of state government. Nelson M. moved that Senate File number 2227 and House File number 1935, now on the General Register, be referred to the Chief Clerk for comparison.
Hearing no objection, so ordered. Representative Winkler. Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to let members know our Higher Education committee meets tomorrow morning in room 10 at 8 o'clock. Thank you.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, members, we will be coming in tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, recessing for caucus, and then taking up the agriculture and housing bill. When that is done, we will be moving on to transportation. And so, Madam Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 9 a.m. Friday, April 26, 2019.
Representative Winkler moves that when the House adjourns today, adjourn until 9 a.m. Friday, April 26, 2019. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. Representative Winkler.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Winkler moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. Friday, April 26, 2019.